Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Undercurrent, coming to you from, well, one of the most beautiful parts of Perth, up here at Parliament House. Now, this week's episode is absolutely jam-packed, but we're going to start with a story by Ryan McCarthy about the differences between the United States lending system and Australia's lending system. Over there, if you've had enough, you can throw your keys back at the bank. But here, they'll not only take you down for the cost of the house, they'll destroy your future as well.
Loans for the purchase of newly erected dwellings slumped by 12% in February. Over the past 3 months, loans are down almost 36%, marking the biggest 3-monthly fall in records going back 32 years. In a time of record revenue earnings by the big banks, why are so many West Australians having their homes repossessed, and why is this issue flying under the radar of politicians and mainstream media?
I can tell you a story of a property in Halls Head, which about 4 years ago the people bought the block of land, built a beautiful home on it, and then for obvious reasons had to sell it for $2.45 million. Several years later, the people that bought it from them for that money just sold it for $970,000. A lot of blood on the floor in Mandurah.
Why do you feel so many homes in this economic boom time are being repossessed?
The majority of the people, certainly here in Western Australia, are doing it pretty tough. Rising cost of living, not only electricity costs and water rates and council rates, but you've got everything else, and as a result of mortgage rates going up, there's more foreclosures or home repos.
So how many homes a day are being repossessed?
It's rumoured around our industry in Perth, WA, 5 per day. They're all the last 3 months mortgagee sales.
I really think they need to consider how much deposit they've actually got. Also, they should really think about the associated costs with buying a property, and also you need to be mindful, if you were to lose your job, what would happen. So all those things need to be considered when taking on that commitment for a mortgage.
Would you say a lot of people who shouldn't be given a mortgage are being given mortgages?
Not now. But in the heady days, in 06, 07 and 08, banks were dishing out loans to, all you really needed was a heartbeat, and you would get a mortgage. Now, as it's come home to roost and they're unable to pay, and many of the people out there who are getting the repossession or having their homes repossessed have been first home buyers, first home owners, and are now out on the streets. And it gets to a point where, maybe 3 months has passed without mortgage payments being made. They will execute through the courts a sheriff to come out, and they will either knock on your door if you're home and speak to you and let you know you've got 14 days to vacate, or they'll pin a note on your door with the same.
And then what happens after 14 days?
And normally a business that has eventuated with this particular downturn in the market is the smaller repo companies, which we affectionately call, and they act between the lender and the real estate agent, and normally they're based in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, could be anywhere, doesn't seem to be any in Perth. And what happens is they give instructions to a real estate agent to go in, clean the property up if needed, and go ahead and exercise it by auction for sale.
If somebody is actually struggling with managing their debt, it really is important to get professional advice. We would strongly recommend that they speak to their financial planner. If they haven't got one, find a good financial planner or speak to their bank manager, and to see what can be done in regards to some strategies to put in place to actually reduce that debt.
In February this year, the government announced its decision to scrap its debt advice service. The multi-million-dollar fund set up by the Labor government in 2008 paid for a network of advisors to help people struggling with debt payments and provide advice on how to access affordable credit. Where is the social responsibility of our politicians when people are suffering? Is there anything the government or the big banks are doing in particular to help people that fall into hard times?
Not a thing. Unfortunate, but they don't. There's nothing there. There's no net to catch anyone falling. Unfortunately, you've got a commitment there. Unlike the United States, where people can walk away from their mortgage, here you can't. You may very well walk away from the house, but let's say your debt is $500,000 and the property sells for $400,000. Well, there is a $100,000 debt which will carry you, will follow you around, I should say, and until it is either paid off or absolved or negotiated out.
Is bankruptcy an option?
Absolutely, yeah. And many people will have to be forced to go down that path because we've got 15% of the population that's reaping from the mining industry and the gas and oil, whereas the other 85% of the population in the metropolitan area and just outside of that is doing it tough, you know.
We've got horror stories because we've just tried to survive the last 5 years in the global financial crisis, and really that has put a stress on most investors. Okay, so most asset values have actually come down considerably.
You don't have to go too far to go and see, you know, the mess that some people are in. And Mosman Park, worst performing suburb in the whole of Australia, down 43%.
Good practice would be is to actually stress test to see if what would happen in the event of interest rates rising, say 4 or 5%, and see what impact that would have on their actual serviceability.
Can you see interest rates continuing to rise the way they have been?
Look, this is another issue. The Reserve Bank continually states that, you know, maybe we'll put up interest rates next month, maybe we'll put them up the following month, and then they don't. So it leaves a lack of confidence in people.
Do you have any suggestions for things that can be put in place?
I would think that banks, with making their enormous profits, maybe should be putting a portion of their profits into some protection mechanism for people that are in a situation of, you know, home repossession. And
The bank's assessment of Australia's survival of the worldwide financial crisis of 2008 is that we have one of the most diligent financial systems in the world, and in a time of record profit, our 4 major banks' profiteering interest prevents them from sharing financial responsibility for their customers in times of hardship.